Welcome to High Point University's Leadership and Life Skills series. Join us now as I sit down with Byron Pitts, the co-anchor of ABC News Nightline, a member of the Horatio Alger Association for Distinguished Americans, and High Point University's journalist in residence.
High Point University presents A Conversation with Byron Pitts and Nido Cobain is a production of UNC-TV in association with High Point University.
Hello, I'm Nido Cobain, president of High Point University. On this program, I am delighted to have one of our good friends, Mr. Byron Pitts, Emmy Award journalist extraordinaire, a man you've seen on television many times on 60 Minutes, as well as the co-anchor of Nightline on ABC. At High Point University, he is our journalist in residence, and we're delighted to have him with us here now. Byron, welcome to High Point University.
Thank you, my friends. Honored to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you here. You know, your life story is just amazing, just amazing. You grew up with a lot of adversity, and you went on to accomplish such a high level of excellence.
Thank you. Professionally,
in your community, with your connections. Among many of your accolades, of course, is your induction in the Horatio Alger Association Distinguished Americans, which is a recognition of your accomplishments and your overcoming adversity and finding abundance. And now you're just helping people make good things happen, which is a great, great tribute to you and to your life.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So I want to begin this conversation with you about your upbringing. You, in fact, in one of your books, you said something that's quite touching, and many people can relate to that. This is your autobiographical book called Step Out on Nothing. I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell us why it's titled Step Out on Nothing. But in this book you say, while my mother, you're a football player in high school and then in college, while my mother attended every single one of my football and wrestling competitions in high school, I never saw my father's face in the crowd. I always missed his presence and missed the things a father would teach a son. How to tie a tie, how to polish a pair of shoes, or ask a girl out on a date. I would learn these things later from a collection of men. 20 years later, your father was absent, and then 20 years later, you had a little meeting with him. Take us there, please.
Sure. Well, like so many people in our country, I was raised by my mother, and I'm sure we'll talk more about her. She is my hero. Your father passed away when you were a child. My father basically abandoned our family, one could say. So, like a lot of boys, I would think in particular, who don't have a relationship with their father, I was angry for much of my life. I mean, I've always kind of looked pleasant like this, but inside, I was angry. I always felt he was absent because I wasn't good enough. And I was angry with him. Every bad thing in my life, I blamed on him. And for a good portion of my life, that anger was wonderful fuel. It drove me to be the best student I could be, to be the best athlete I could be. When I began my career, to be the best journalist I could be. But I realized as I got older that hate is a dangerous fuel, right? It isn't very efficient. Love is a far more powerful and sustainable fuel. So as I got older and God softened my spirit about my dad, I decided I would meet him to have a conversation, now man to man. And so, you know, as a journalist, words matter to me, and I've mapped out the conversation, what's going to happen. And so we meet for breakfast at a restaurant in Baltimore, where I'm from. And I'd prepared what I was going to say to him. And I basically said, look, I forgive you, and I want you to know that I love you. So in that moment, I was waiting for this, this Hallmark card moment, right? He might start weeping and apologize, and we would embrace, and it would seem awkward to the people in the restaurant, these two grown men embracing. Instead, what happened, my father said, he looked at me and he says, you gonna finish eating that? He pointed at my plate. There was something on my plate he wanted to eat. And so for the first moment, I was crushed because this man, I'd never heard him say, I love you, I'm proud of you. But a moment later, I burst out laughing. It was the funniest because I thought for most of my life, I've been dragging this man around. But clearly, he hasn't been very focused on me. And so in that moment, I felt, as I have so many times in my life, just God's grace, that I let it go, the anger that I felt. And I was reminded that while I certainly longed for the love of this one man, I was blessed with wonderful elders in my church, great coaches, great teachers. While raised Baptist, I went to a Franciscan high school. I like to say I had the best of both worlds. Educated Catholic, raised Baptist. And so I thought that how fortunate I was that God still gave me what I needed. And so I was able to let go of that anger. He and I have a relationship now. We're not particularly close, but certainly I honor his life and what he did give to me.
Have you seen him since then?
We see each other every now and then. It's you know, my mother used to always tell him, she would say, his name is William. She says, William, you're going to need that boy someday. Yeah, whatever. And he and I had a moment probably about 10 years ago or so, and he was asking me why I didn't spend more time with him. In that particular moment, my mother was having some health issues. And I said, it was sort of like what Mama told you when I was a child. When I was a boy, you had no time for me. Now that I'm a man, I have very limited time for you. And so, you know, if I can support him in any way that I can, financially, I'm happy to do that. But I've made my choice about that.
I take it you no longer take him to a restaurant.
No, we haven't been out to eat for a while. He's up in age now. My brother, who is a saint, spends quality time. It's amazing I think for all of us as adults to be mindful how we treat children. That lives with them always. What we do, what we say. And so while I'm 57 years old now, the reality is in my relationship with him, I am still 10 in my heart.
Yes.
You know? And so while I've let go of the hurt and the anger, I'm still guarded around it.
Yeah.
Respectful, but guarded.
And you've done well in your life in spite of it. So.
Well, you know, I would say because of it. You know, my mother, her name is Clarice Pitts. I always find an opportunity to say her name out loud. God called her home about 7 years ago. She was born and raised not that far from here in a community called Friendship, outside of Apex, North Carolina, near Raleigh. And my mother raised us to believe, as the Bible says, to count it all joy, that everything happens in our life happens for a reason. And it is meant to grow us, that there are no stumbling blocks in life, there are only stepping stones. Because I didn't have a good relationship with my father, I had a great relationship with my mother. I have an older brother and sister. My older brother sacrificed a good portion of his childhood to be supportive of me. So, yeah, not in spite of, but because of the hard lessons that separation afforded me.
They say we are what we eat, what we read, what we surround ourselves with. I choose to be extraordinary, and I get my start every day with daily motivation.
In our global economy where 1 million people can do what you can do, you have to compete with your differences. That's something extra that you possess. That something extra is your differential advantage, your DA. Are you passionate? That answer must be a resounding yes. Knowing and using and understanding your differential advantage will help you on your quest for excellence.
Sign up today to receive daily motivation, a short lesson each Monday with your video life coach, Prevailing, and inspirational quotes the rest of the week. It's relevant, quick, and free. Choose to be extraordinary.
So you went to college, and while you were in college, your mother sent you 152 letters. That in of itself is amazing. But she sent you these letters, and she wrote them in different colors of ink.
Yes.
Tell us, I beg, why?
So my mother, God-fearing woman, loved the Lord. My mother believed there was nothing that prayer and hard work couldn't overcome. And I like to tell people that my mother could quote scripture with the finest church elder. She could also hold a conversation with any sailor in America, if you get what I'm saying.
You sure she was a Baptist?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. She certainly had a Pentecostal spirit to her. You know, she could. And so my mother, when I was in college, my mother wrote me a letter every week I was in college, all 4 years in school. And so, so they came in 3 colors. And usually there would be a postcard inside. My mother's favorite book next to the Bible is The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who's a graduate of Ohio Wesleyan, my alma mater. And so there had always been an index card with the Bible verse, something encouraging. In fact, my roommate from college, a gentleman named Peter Holthe from Minnetonka, Minnesota. Pete's father ran an accounting firm in Minnetonka, and his father would send him checks. My mama never once sent me a check while I was in school. But by the end of our freshman year, Pete would be excited about my mother's letters, and he would let me look at his father's check. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But my mother knew the power of words. So the 3 letters, one would be in blue, black, or red ink. If it were blue, it meant there was some issue going on in her life. My mother, who was single parent much of my life, would talk in appropriate language about her own struggles, her own relationships in her life, or if there was a death in the family. If the letter came in black, it was, things are fine, your sister's doing this, your brother's doing this, your grandma's doing this or that, right? Family matters. But if the letter came in red ink, oh my Lord, that meant my mother was angry.
She's talked to a sailor or 2 that week.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And her anger was aimed at you. One of the great things about my mother.
Angry at you?
Oh, absolutely. One of the great things about my mother, she loved deeply. I mean, my mother she was the original ride or die. Always supportive, always there, always encouraging, but incredibly demanding. In my mother's house, like I say, while I was born in Baltimore, I was raised in my mama's house. And those weren't always necessarily the same place. Incredibly demanding. In my mama's house, there were 2 rules. Rule number 1, she made the rules. Rule number 2, you follow the rules. And so this one particular time in college, I was struggling academically. At this beautiful, I have to say, what a spectacular campus. What a wonderful environment you've created here. You should be commended. And so congratulations to you, my friend. It's such a spectacular place. I know for a fact I couldn't have gotten here when I was applying to colleges.
Not if you had letters written in red.
No, not at all. So my freshman year in college, I was struggling academically. I was on academic probation. I think I held the school record for staying on academic probation for the longest time. They forgive me. I'm on the board of trustees now, so I guess it's okay that I struggled in the beginning. And so I decided, a professor told me that I wasn't college material, and that I should leave school. And so I was 17 years old, raised to respect authority. I said, okay, I'll quit school. So when I was considering leaving college, I told my brother to begin to prep mom that this phone call's coming. And he said, well, that's too big for me. I'm going to tell my sister so she can tell mama. So they hinted to her that I was thinking about maybe quitting college because it was really hard and coming back home. So my loving, God-fearing, Bible-quoting mother wrote me this letter in red ink. I won't share the letter in detail because there's some barroom language in the letter. But the letter started, "Dear Mr. Braindead."
Wow.
"Have you lost your blank mind?" That's how it started. Wow. And it got harsher from there. But to her credit, by the end of the letter, she said, "I know you better than you know yourself, and I know a God who is able. You're not going to quit. You're not going to leave school. You're going to endure." And that speaks to who she was and who she is in my life still. I mean, my mother believed deeply that God is a loving God, and that all things are possible, and that I would endure, and I did.
Yes. Were those different colors, the letters, were those, the color was also on the envelope on the outside? Or
Oh no,
just
it was a basic white envelope. But
no, I know, but she wrote like in red on the outside of the envelope?
Absolutely. Oh, so you knew.
You knew before you opened the letter?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Then why in the world would you read the letter if it was in red?
Well, you know, I was of that generation where you feared your parents. I feared my mother. So the consequence of not reading her red letter might be, I mean, my mother was one of those parents who, my mother, she went to all my games in high school. She would come to one game a year while I was in college because it was expensive for her to travel. But my mother would call professors at home. She would go see the president if need be.
I must have met your mom.
Right.
I have a few of those here, yeah.
Yeah, my mother never took no. She was...
You drove.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. You know, the ironic thing is that when you were a child, you had a challenge of stuttering.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that?
Well, I am still a stutterer. There are certain words that I avoid. So, you know, I didn't learn to read until I was almost 13, and I stuttered until my junior year in college. And I had this wonderful professor in college. My freshman year in college, when they asked incoming students, you know, what do you want to do? And one of the letters I struggled with is J. So when he said, so, Mr. Byron Pitts from Baltimore, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be I couldn't say journalist.
I see.
Classmates laughed.
Yeah.
And so afterwards, this professor said, so, Mr. Pitts, what's the problem? I said, excuse me? He said, son, you were spitting all over yourself. I mean, he was sort of like my mother, very direct about. And so he was a speech pathologist, and so he worked with me. So we would do things like, he would have me read the newspaper with pencils in my mouth so I could feel what it felt like to speak correctly. He would have me read the newspaper backwards to focus on each individual word. And then he decided it was a good idea to force me to host a live radio show on campus. Because he felt, you know, I want you to confront this challenge for you. And so with his help, I learned to manage my stutter. And for instance, like I've learned what my triggers are. If I am nervous, angry, tired, and someone who's covered war, I mean, sometimes you're all three of those things at once. I've learned to manage it, and yeah, I've done okay.
That's amazing. What an inspiring story that is for any person who's struggling with any challenge whatsoever, especially young people who sometimes believe that, you know, the world's coming to an end. Yeah. I can't do this. I can't pass calculus. Yeah. I can't, you know, can't get into a certain club or certain society. And here you overcame a significant challenge and went on to be successful in a profession that demanded a full command of the very thing you were challenged with. It's remarkable.
That's grace, brother.
And you've learned to...
That's God's amazing grace.
Yes, and you've learned to manage your anger pretty well.
Pretty well.
Yeah, well... Well, let me read you something from your book.
Uh-oh.
This is, don't worry, this is written in black. So, this is page 175 of your autobiography. You're describing here showing up at CBS for an interview, and that the person who was doing the interview paid little attention to you and did not really respond to you, did not show much respect, kept messing around with his desk and so on instead of making eye contact with you. And then you said after a few minutes of cackling on the phone, he turned to me and said, I don't have much time, so let's get right to it. And he said to you, I don't think you're very good. You don't write well enough to be on my show, and I want only the best correspondents on my show. And that is not you. Emphasis is his. He never made eye contact with me. He went on for a bit longer. When he finally looked up at me and said, I hope this doesn't hurt your feelings. I'm just giving it to you straight. Nothing's personal, he said with a smile. If there's anything else, if there's nothing else, he said, I have some work to do. He stood up and gestured me towards the door. Like a kid educated in Catholic school, you write, I jumped to my feet and said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your honesty and your time." But on the inside, I wanted to punch him in the nose.
Now,
You
that
should
was
have called your mom, really. You should have
it's
called
true.
your mom.
Well, actually, and I think probably the editor or my mother made me change it. My instinct, I wanted to kick his ass, is what I wanted to say. That's actually what I wanted to say.
That's much more expressive. Yes.
Yes.
We see the picture of that much better. And then just before I turned for the door, I stopped, you wrote, looked back at him and said something I had never said to any human being before. Quote, "I respect what you've said, and I respect your position. But please know this, when I'm on my knees praying in my room at night, not once have I ever called your name. My destiny, sir, is not in your hands. Not now, not ever. Thank you for your time. I'll see you down that road."
Yes, sir.
Did you ever see this guy again?
I did. I saw him two occasions.
He wanted to be interviewed on your show, and you said,
I saw him a few months later. He lost his job. He was fired. And I ran into him across the street from the office. Now, I am from East Baltimore, and so I had one response. I am Clarice Pitts' child.
We get the picture.
Right? Yeah. But again, I wished him well. I said, I'll pray for you. And then the next time I ran into him, fast forward years later, I was covering 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And I was the lead reporter for CBS on that particular day. And they were sending down a team of producers to work with me. And who do they send but this guy? And so in that moment, I knew I'm working with someone who I don't believe really respects my work, who may attempt to undermine me on this important day. And he says, "Byron, we worked together, so we did some important work today." So day ends, he says, "Byron, you did a great job, da-da-da-da-da." He says, "I don't know if you remember this, but I was unkind to you once." I'm like, "Nah, brother, I don't know what you're talking about." There's another scripture my mom was fond of, Psalm 37. "Fret not thyself for evildoers, for they shall soon be cut down like grass and wither away." God was a gangster, right? It was, to me, what that scripture says is, when people discourage you for whatever reason, let it go. They will be dealt with in time. And so that's how I felt about him. He'd already been dealt with, and I could move on.
Often in life, when you're trying to do good things, there are impediments in the road, right?
Sure.
That's what we try to tell our students at High Point University, that if life were perfect, then it might be easy, but it might not be fulfilling. That it's really, the potholes will be in the roads, going over them, under them, around them. That makes it exciting, challenging, and that causes you to overcome fear and be courageous. What we call here faithful courage. If you have faith and courage, put them together, then you can make something in your life. We're a premier life skills school, Byron, so we invest enormous resources in the classroom to make sure that each of our students, when they enter the hallways of this university, learn how to master their own discipline, whatever they're majoring in. But of equal importance, we want to frame that with preparation for life itself. Dealing with people like that, overcoming challenges like you've overcome, seeing the best that lies ahead, that you may not see at the moment, but it does lie ahead. And knowing how to deal with life's opportunities and challenges with equal vigor and equal discipline. Let me take you now to your professional pathway. You mentioned 9/11. You were in Iraq at one point reporting. You were in Afghanistan reporting. Take us there and tell us. Just walk us through the experience. You get on an airplane, you go over there, you know you're about to walk into hell's way, perhaps, and you see what is going on and you want to report as accurately as you can. How does one do that?
I was very fortunate to cover the war, to cover our men and women in the military. God bless them. They are the best of us. They are the best of us. It was the greatest honor of my professional life to be embedded. I was embedded with members of the U.S. Marine Corps. Fine people who risked their lives every single. I had this one moment. I remember they were about to go try and take control of the Ministry of Oil in downtown Baghdad. This is the day that the statue of Saddam fell down, and everyone thought the war will end the next day. So we're in this vehicle, and the expectation was that these young Marines would be challenged. So there would be some fighting going on. And so we're in this MRAP, the vehicle they travel in. So I'm in this vehicle with maybe 12 young Marines. The youngest was 18. They teased him because he was the baby. The oldest was 23. And so it was like being on a high school football, basketball team bus heading to a game. They're joking, they're laughing, elbowing. They're really giving this one kid a hard time. They have nicknames for everybody. Some we can't repeat. And they're just joking around. I'm thinking, these are kids. And then I remember the elder statesman on the MRAP, a 23-year-old corporal. He said, Marines mount up. And they went from being children to being warriors. And that when the back of the MRAP opens, you can't be certain what's going to greet you on the other side. And to see their discipline, their devotion to each other, this notion that they had each other's back will always stick with me. It had some wonderful, some of the funniest moments of my career. I'll share one story. Later that day, the Marines take over the space, and then we have to leave to get back to the MRAP to leave, and they're being fired upon. And so we're going to run in groups of 3, and so I got to decide, okay, now there's a chance I might get shot. Okay, I don't want to get shot in the hand because I'm a journalist. That's not good. I don't want to get shot in the leg because I might limp, and I don't want to, that's not good. So I made up my mind I did not want to get shot between here and there. Anyway, so I'm running with the sergeant major, a man from California, and another young corporal from Mississippi. And so it's our time to run across this picnic area based outside of this office building. Anyway, as we're running, they open fire again, and so we have to duck behind these tables, like these stone tables, lunch counters that people would sit at, maybe play checkers on, about this big, about that high. And there's several. But for some reason, we all zone in on the one. So the corporal, the kid, he gets there first. The sergeant major gets there right after him. I got nowhere to go, so I dive on the sergeant major's back. And we're close. And so I'm one side above him, our helmets are meshed, and he says, Pitts, you okay? Yes, sir, Sergeant Major, I'm fine. Any wet spots? Now, he was referring to check for blood.
Yes.
I said, no, sir, no wet spots. He says, you're okay? I said, yes, sir, I'm fine. I'm nervous, and I'm squeezing him tight. And he says, you sure you're okay? Yes, sir, I'm fine. He says, okay. He says, either make love to me or get off me, but you can't stay here. And it was the funniest moment in this very intense time. Yeah. But he knew that I needed the humor to laugh, to break the moment. But it was, we can't do enough for our veterans in this country.
How does a journalist get embedded? You literally go live with the soldiers?
Yes. The embed program that started in the Iraq War was organized with major news outlets in the Pentagon. So we went to Quantico, Virginia, and trained with the Marine Corps for a couple of weeks, mostly to better understand the culture and weapon systems and first aid. And then the original plan was journalists were supposed to embed with their unit, either meet them in the States or in Kuwait, and then go to war and stay with them until it was over. But it became so expensive. And early on, there's a realization this war is going to go on for a while. So I stayed with my unit for about 6 months. And then, you get up every day, you go to the briefings, they allow you to report on everything except their positions.
You sleep in barracks at night, or?
Oh, I wish. No, you slept in the desert. You slept on the ground. You slept wherever, in abandoned buildings. In fact, I remember the night before they invaded Baghdad, and the Air Force sort of softened the target. And that night we slept in a graveyard, in a cemetery, on the outskirts of Baghdad.
Byron, how does a journalist remain neutral? I mean, you're human beings with feelings and emotions and frames of reference and experiences, and then you're assigned the responsibility to report on a story, whatever the story may be. And you went to school, and much like our students at High Point University, go to the School of Communication, major in journalism, etc. You find yourself in that spot where you want to report the facts, as you were educated to do, but your instincts must seep into the color of the story somehow. For example, might it affect the pitch of your voice? Might it affect the way you emphasize certain words? Might it affect the way you put sentences in a certain priority order, which could taint my ears and my mind and my interpretation of the message? So how does a journalist, a responsible journalist like you, ensure that we as the mass who may watch you, we're watching honest to goodness, truth?
It certainly is something that my profession struggles with. I think people have taken the opportunity to exploit that, I think, for political reasons. But I think at the end of the day, that's what journalism is. Like, it's my job, as I'm sure your students learn here, who, what, when, where, and how, sometimes why. We all have our lanes, right? When you go to the dentist, you don't ask them about your car, right? I mean, and so my job as a journalist is to report the truth. My job is to afflict the comfortable, comfort the afflicted. My job is to give voice to the voiceless. My job is to speak truth to power. My opinion doesn't matter. I mean, there are people, there are commentators who give their opinion. That's not my job. My job is to, I mean, part of the reason why I became a journalist, growing up in Baltimore, my church, my home church, New Shiloh Baptist Church, was engaged in the civil rights movement, the late 1960s, early 70s, primarily as a fundraising source for the struggle deeper in the South. But our church would on occasion go to rallies, and my mama would take us. It was, couldn't afford a babysitter, and so it was, we all went. Wherever mama went, we went. And so I remember as a child how the police would behave if journalists were present. It would be, "Excuse me, sir, please step back across the line." But those rallies we would go to where there was no media present, "Hey, you, get the hell back over there." They were much more aggressive. And so as a child, I saw the power of the media to keep the powerful accountable. And that's one of the things that attracted to me. One of the things I think that's dangerous in our business, and too many people who present themselves as journalists get into giving their opinions. I'm not that smart. I mean, my job is to witness something and to give you the facts, give you the truth. And one of the challenges in journalism is certainly collecting facts, but also reporting the truth. And sometimes there are differences between facts and truth. My favorite example is, the fact is, slavery was legal in the United States. That's a fact. The truth is, it was always wrong. And so I think as a responsible journalist, my job is to gather facts and to seek truth. And be mindful that the truth kind of moves around. It depends on what side of the house you're looking at. I remember going with the Marines into Baghdad the first time, on top of these vehicles that are about 8 feet off the ground. And you would see these families, men and women and children on the street, like waving, like, oh my gosh, this feels like Europe at the end of World War II, that they're welcoming us here. Because that's what it looked like from that perspective. Later on, I saw footage shot from the ground. Different experience. These huge, loud machines. Everyone has on goggles. They have big weapons. They look like invaders. And so you have to seek to find the truth in that and to report the facts as best you can.
You know, it's so confusing when I watch television is that journalism and mere opining, sometimes agendized opining, get mixed up.
Yeah.
And you really have to be discerning to figure out if all this chatter that you're watching in front of you is for real, or is it a bunch of people representing different agendas, different organizations whose primary focus really is to brainwash, albeit often disguised as journalism. And that's a very bothersome truth that we're living with today. What is your take on that?
Well,
and why would responsible journalists agree to be on panels that may in fact be loaded, quote unquote, with agendized opinions?
sure. This whole debate now about fake news, as they say.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but
All right. No, it's all good.
fake news versus less fake news.
Well, my mama will call it lying, right? That there are lies and there's the truth. I know at this great institution and in this wonderful community of High Point, everyone is the best. Everyone gives 100%. No one mails it in. No one looks for shortcuts. I believe that. In my profession, there are a lot of people who seek shortcuts. At the end of the day, my profession is a business. And there are people who are engaged with the idea of getting viewers, and I think some people, believe that you go about that. I mean, because one of the things that it seems to me that's occurring at two extremes that we see, most often on MSNBC and on Fox at the other end, that from my perspective, all that goes on in those two extremes often isn't the profession that I'm engaged in. It isn't journalism. It's people yelling at each other and giving and assuming the worst of the opposition. I don't necessarily think that's the healthiest thing for us. But here's what I know. As I think it's pretty clear by now, I am an optimistic person. I am clear that our great nation is flawed. But my travels have convinced me that America is still the greatest country on earth. Despite our many challenges, at the end of the day, we're a nation made up primarily of good and decent people. And my lane, I think about the civil rights movement, right? The end of Jim Crow. When those images were shown of the children being hit with water hoses in Alabama, what happened not too far from here at the Woolworths that our dear friend Bob Brown was engaged in. When good and decent people around this community, around the country, saw and could read what was going on, that we made the right choice. I think about, in my mind, what's going on now isn't new. At the SS Museum in Berlin, Germany, there's this quotation in one of the things about what happened there. And one of Adolf Hitler's minister of propaganda had this quote. It says, "If you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes tomorrow's prevailing truth." And so this notion of people who seek to demonize our institutions, demonize professions. I mean, granted, my business is flawed. We get it wrong often. But the fundamentals of journalism are part of the fundamentals of America. And that I think most people still rely on journalists to tell them what's going on in the world. And I think this crazy phase we're in right now, that people who do it the right way will continue getting it right. And then as push comes to shove, good and decent people will seek out good information, and that will go forward. I just believe that. I mean, I have no doubt about that. I just finished reading this wonderful book about Ulysses S. Grant, and you talk about a nation divided, coming out of the Civil War, president just assassinated, they're dismantling Reconstruction, real tension in America. I sometimes think that our ancestors would laugh at us when they hear us complain about the things that we complain about now, in comparison to what they dealt with. And as tense as it was, we got it right. So this weird phase we're in right now, I think we will, regardless of where one stands on it politically, I think we will move forward. We'll be okay.
Take us to the set of Nightline for a moment, and a tradition in television for a long time. When was Nightline first?
Well, it started off, Ted Koppel was the original anchor of
Yes.
Nightline, and it started during the Iran hostage crisis.
70s?
Yes, sir. And it was supposed to be one night, then it became two, then it became now, you know.
Tell us how Byron Pitts prepares for a segment of Nightline or for anchoring Nightline.
Sure. Well, I'm blessed to work with a wonderful, dynamic team of producers, incredibly diverse, committed. They work so very hard. And so the typical day, we have a senior staff meeting at 10:30. We kind of talk about what's in the news that day. 11 o'clock, we have a team, the entire staff. And then coming out of that meeting, you have a sense of what we're going to work on. I mean, we're a magazine show. We're the only nightly magazine show, which is a little more demanding than breaking news, because there has to be a narrative in our piece. There has to be our pieces are supposed to offer you context about what happened. Because oftentimes, when the evening news comes on at 6:30, it's just almost like a headline service. Our job is to hopefully take you to a different level. Our pieces are 8 to 10, sometimes 12 minutes long. And so we work on those pieces all day long. They decide fairly early on what they're going to be. And there may be 2 producers, 4 producers, team of editors working. And they really edit up until we go on the air. I start getting scripts about 7 or 8. And I weigh in. I'm respectful of my colleagues who work on copy. I don't just change it because I can. They do a really good job of writing in my voice, and we'll go through it. The one thing I do almost every night I anchor, I always want to end the broadcast, if I can, on an uplifting note or something thoughtful. And so I'll usually have a quotation I'll find. Like you, I know the power of words to lift people. So I always try and find a quotation to end the show with that relates to whatever is going on in the news. And then I always end the broadcast the exact same way. And I always say, thank you for watching Nightline, and thanks for the company. I say that in tribute. There's a gentleman, his name is Larry Stagner. Larry Stagner was the longtime anchor at WTVD-TV in Durham, Raleigh, that market. And Larry passed away a few years ago. And Larry was my mentor. This is a white man from North Carolina who nurtured me, who supported me, who encouraged me. And so as my nod to him every night, because he would always end his broadcast on Channel 11 in Raleigh is, thanks for the company, this wonderful baritone North Carolina voice. And so as my nod to him every night, I always end the broadcast telling the viewers, thanks for the company. Because it is a privilege to have people, watch your work and hopefully trust you that you're giving them the facts and you're giving to them straight, without opinion, without bias.
Do you have any regrets along the pathway of your life?
Oh, sure.
Anything you can talk about in public?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I would have dreamed bigger. Certainly some of my advice to young people. So since I was 18 years old, my dream was to be a 60 Minutes correspondent. And my mother and I prayed for that on my 18th birthday, on our knees, asking the Lord, and then claimed it. So if you talk to me for 2 minutes, you talk to my mama for 30 seconds, you knew since age 18 that was my prayer and that was my goal. And so I got to work for that wonderful program when I was 45, but didn't really like it. I wasn't particularly, it wasn't for me in many ways. And I was sort of frustrated about that, because be careful what you pray for. And so I left to work at ABC, and I'm having the time of my professional life for a variety of reasons. And so I think about it now that, certainly where I came from, right? 18 years old, freshman in college, on academic probation, still reading at a 10th grade level, still managing my stutter, that wanting to work on 60 Minutes seemed crazy and unreasonable at that time. But in many ways, I've been reminded, my faith that, and forgive me for talking so much about my faith.
No, it's wonderful. We're a God, family, and country school here.
Amen.
We like it.
Amen. That, all things are possible, that you can do anything. And that's one of the great things about in this country. One of the things that makes us so unique as a nation, there are wonderful countries on this great earth. But one of the magical things about America, and your story speaks to that. You came to the United States with $50 in your pocket, and look what you've built in your lifetime. And that story, your story, my story, the story of so many people, it's only possible in America. Only in America. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter what you look like. If you believe it, if you work hard enough, you're optimistic enough, dream big enough, you can do anything. So the advice I give young people is to dream, whatever your dream is now, make it bigger, like make it 10 times larger. But I seek not to think too much about, I don't worry, I'm not a worrier at all. And I seek not to regret because, as my mama would say, I know who I am, and I know whose I am. And, the God I serve makes no mistakes. And the path I've been on, certainly I've stumbled. I've done things I wish I would have done differently. But I'm just so grateful. I'm blessed to be here with you. The wonderful things happening in my life. So no real regrets, just mostly gratitude.
On this campus, we are focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. There's a growth mindset in our institutional DNA.
Hi, I'm Steve Wozniak, the Woz, and I'm proud to be High Point University's Innovator in Residence.
Hi, I'm Byron Pitts, High Point University's Journalist in Residence. Welcome to HPU.
I'm Mark Randolph, and I'm proud to be the Entrepreneur in Residence at the premier life skills university, High Point University.
So you wrote this book, which is very interesting. And perhaps that came out of, I want to ask you what caused you to think of this book. It's called Be the One. It's a new book, just came out last year. 6 true stories of teens overcoming hardship with hope. I'm going to ask you to tell us one of those stories in a minute.
Sure.
But in the book you say, hero is a word we use too often in our culture, an accolade usually heaped upon athletes and celebrities. But people who defend life and save lives deserve such titles. Well, the kids in this book all saved at least one life, their own.
Like you, I travel the country a lot, and I'm given the opportunity to talk to young people a lot, and I'm struck by whether they're at a beautiful, spectacular university like this or some other place, that so many young people in our country are troubled by something, either some hardship in their own life, feeling unsure about the future. That's one of the things I love about your Success Center, that you really are preparing young people to greet the world. I saw at the center tonight.
Yes.
The airplane.
Yes.
And that was explained to me that and so I love how you're intentional about details, that you're preparing them to have that conversation on a plane that may be a turning point in their professional lives.
Absolutely.
So I applaud you for that attention to detail, because success is an intentional exercise. Rarely does it happen by accident. So no matter the institution, so many young people feel burdened by different challenges. Well, the real reason I wrote the book, there's a young woman I met in my hometown of Baltimore when I wrote my first book. And I'm talking about, the power, the importance of education, being positive, working hard, all the things that you represent and that you preach at this spectacular university. And so afterwards, kids line up to talk to me, middle school kids. And the questions I usually get are, do you know Beyonce? Have you ever interviewed Jay-Z? And so this one little girl, as I describe her, you've not met her, but you know her. Everyone we know knows her. 11-year-old girl. She said, Mr. Pitts, I heard what you said, and thank you so much for coming back to your hometown and tell us about education. Mr. Pitts, here's my question. Said, Mr. Pitts, when you were 11 years old in Baltimore, where did you go, where did you hide when the world hurt too much? Where did you go, where did you hide when the world hurt too much? No child in the most powerful country on earth should ever ask that question, but we know that they do. Her backstory is, my mother had her first child, my sister, when she was 17. This young lady, her mother had her when she was 16, but a child. When this little girl was 4, her mother had a choice to make, her daughter or her new boyfriend, and she chose her new boyfriend. At 7, this little girl, now from 4 to 7, she sleeps over auntie's house, someone from church, a loving teacher, never slept in the same place, weeks in a row. 7, the family services finally discovers this child in crisis and puts her in a foster care situation. Her foster mom is 81 years old, a diabetic, suffers from daily fainting spells. One can make the argument this 7-year-old child was taking care of this 81-year-old woman as much as she was taking care of her. But she called her mama, because this is the closest thing she had to family. She turns 10 and a half, her fortune changed again. Her foster mom, and this is no judgment on her, perhaps for financial reasons, a loving spirit, I'm not sure. She brings in another child into her house, 17-year-old boy. His first night there, he goes into her room after dark and whispers in her ear, "You don't matter. No one will believe you. No one will care." I met her 6 months later. Where do you go, where do you hide when the world hurts too much? Fortunately, after that moment, one of the young teachers, just out of college, said, Mr. Pitts, what did she ask you? She didn't talk to anybody. And I told the teacher what she said, and the school investigated, and they got her out of that situation. And she and I became pen pals. She's now at a university in my home state of Maryland. She's doing just fine. And, but her question stuck with me. I mean, all of us adults, we ask the same question, but children in this great country ask the same question. And so I asked her where she goes when these awful things were happening to her at night when she was 10 years old. And she said, oh, Mr. Pitts, she has this incredible imagination. She loves to read. She had low scores in math, but high scores in reading and comprehension. And she said, Mr. Pitts, when I was being assaulted, I would imagine I was on a journey with Harry Potter. And so the place she hid was her imagination, her love for books. So I decided to write this book and pose that question to a number of young people who have different challenges, whether it be sexual abuse, obesity. This one young woman, beautiful young woman from Alabama. You'd see her, you think she had a cheerleader's life, adorable blonde, blue-eyed girl. Watched her mother attempt suicide in front of her. For a number of years, raised herself, her twin sister, and younger brother in a mobile home park in Alabama, and worked 40 hours a week at a barbecue joint. Finished top in her class. And so I said, so when life was difficult for you, where'd you go, where'd you hide? And she said, oh, I would find a dark place and cry. Because I couldn't let anyone see me cry because I was responsible for my twin, responsible for my younger sibling. Met a young man from the Congo when war broke out. He was 12 years old when the war broke out. And his father says, you know what, I'd rather you be dead than a child soldier. So his father and another farmer sold 2 cows and gave their boys $120 each. And he said, just leave. Go where you want to go. Now, you can fly from Congo to South Africa in about 6 hours. You can drive, it'll take you about 3 days. They walked, 12-year-old boys. Took them 2 years.
Wow.
And so I said, so in that experience, where did you go, where did you hide when the world hurt too much? He said, oh, in church. I said, you went to church? No, the church in my heart. He said, it was interesting things. The rebels, they would savage people on the street, but if someone could physically make it inside a church, they would leave them alone. And so what he discovered in this journey and all the awful things that happened to them along the way, the church inside him, his faith, is what became his place. And so the book is meant to encourage young people, to encourage parents, teachers who have, because as you know, and your life story speaks to this, that it's wonderful if you have 2 loving parents. That's awesome. But a lot of us, that's not the hand we were dealt. But if you have loving adults who can give you what they have to give you in the time they have to give you, can make all the difference. And so with these young people, no one came to save any of them. They saved themselves. And part of your story, part of my story is that each of us, I think at some point, have to decide, I'm going to be okay. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to figure it out. And these young people figured it out.
It's a very inspiring book. It is a book that gives us all hope for the tomorrows of our life. But so does your life story, starting with your mom, who was such an inspiration for you, and your determination to overcome adversity in spite of all the tenacity that would demand. And here you are. You're about to quote me on Nightline. It's amazing. It's amazing what can happen. You know what? This hour has passed so quickly because you're a great storyteller. You're not just a journalist. You tell stories with an impassioned spirit about the very essence of which you speak. We're delighted that you are a journalist in residence at High Point University.
Honored.
I'm delighted that you've taken the time to be with us on this program. And I have no doubt, Byron Pitts, that wherever you go and whoever crosses your path, your life will be a testimony to all that which is good, and those who cross your path will benefit because of you, and because of your example, and because of your stewardship and discipleship. And for that, we are all very grateful to you.
Oh, bless you, brother.
So much.
Thank you so much.
For doing that.
Thank you.